By now, I was used to being able to operate my own production equipment at WHAS, which meant that I didn't have to pre-plan for a tech to be available to assist. I could just walk in and go to work. I could take field tracks on Saturday and edit Saturday night and Sunday morning for my afternoon Sunday show. Case in point, Bluegrass Views on Bluegrass. It involved a journey to the mountains of eastern Kentucky to visit with Barb Edwards, a person I had become acquainted with earlier that year when I was doing background work for a show about strip mining. As you will hear, she's very outspoken, full of mountain folklore, and quite the indigenous musician. We recorded the audio tracks outdoors at a remote state park, and I could swear as she played the dulcimer, the nearby birds would join in, on key and in rhythm, and the longer she played, the bird chorus would grow. I don't know if the birds thought it to be some kind of outdoor concert or what. You be the judge. Here's my radio special, Bluegrass Views on Bluegrass.
And this afternoon on the Cuddly Giant, a music special for you. Bluegrass Views on Bluegrass. Bluegrass music currently enjoying a great deal of fame across the nation, but what is fame? Well, it depends on whom you ask. And since it's their music to begin with, we thought we'd pay a visit to the mountain country in eastern Kentucky to find out what exactly fame means in the mountains. Meet Barb Edwards, Ashland, Kentucky, local musician and preserver of historic mountain music folklore. What's fame mean in the mountains?
Mountain people use the word famous as someone who was famous as a singer in their own area, like up a certain holler, all the people, the families in that holler. But she was talking about a certain singer, this would have been in Greenup County, up Kellen Holler, and that he would be plowing on the mountainside or hunting in the woods, and he sang old ballads, but especially the old Baptist songs, and his voice rang out through the whole holler, through all the hills. And it was just magnificent. And it's still a memory she holds after all those years. And she herself, I finally got to sing ballads for me, but she used one of the lovely old mountain phrases, and I think it's a biblical phrase. She said she would try to sing for me, but she said, "But I've kindly hung my harp on the willow."
Here's Barb again, this time with the dulcimer. Recorded outdoors in Carter Cave Park yesterday.
One morning in May, I met a fair couple making their way. One was a lady so neat and so fair, the other a soldier and a brave volunteer. Good morning to thee. Now where are you going, my pretty lady? I'm going a-walking because it is spring, to see the waters a-gliding, hear the nightingale sing. Pretty lady, it's time to give o'er. Soldier, please play one tune more. I'd rather hear your fiddle by the touch of one string than see waters a-gliding, hear the nightingale sing. Pretty soldier, will you marry me? Oh no, pretty lady, that never can be. I've a wife in London, children twice 3, 2 wives in the army's too many for me. I'll go back to London and stay there 1 year, but often I think of you, my little dear, and if e'er I return, it will be in the spring, to see the waters a-gliding, hear the nightingale sing.
Next up, how bluegrass people enjoy bluegrass music on Bluegrass Views on Bluegrass. Bluegrass Views on Bluegrass. And this afternoon we're talking with Barb Edwards, preserver of historic mountain music folklore and local Ashland musician. Barb, how do mountain people enjoy bluegrass music?
The ballads especially were woven into the daily cycle of life. A woman would sing while she washes her dishes, or while she's down gathering the eggs, or while she's rocking her babies. I don't know how many people that I've taped their ballads and they'll say, I remember Mommy rocking the twins and singing this, you know. Or the men might be hoeing their corn and just, you know, blaring out a good old ballad. The instrumental music was appropriate on the front porch of an evening when you came in tired and hot. And or they had, well, even before you had square dances where a whole community was involved, they had what they called play parties, which were really square dances, except that if you were religious, you didn't square dance, but you could do the same set and call it a play party. And everybody would gather in, and this was appropriate on a Sunday afternoon, so even religious people could go to church and come home and have play parties. And you might have a fiddler, or you might have a banjo picker. The guitar was actually a later instrument. The earliest bands were, well, even the dulcimer was used before, well, I don't know if before, but if you didn't have a fiddle, a dulcimer could do in a small room.
Bluegrass Views on Bluegrass, the Cuddly Giant. Next up, we'll have a discussion on the dulcimer. Bluegrass Views on Bluegrass, a music special this afternoon on the Jim Ferguson Sunday Show. And we're talking with Barbara Edwards. What's the story behind the dulcimer? Where did it come from?
The dulcimer is intrinsic to the southern Appalachian area, and I've interviewed a number of people from right around in Olive Hill, Greenup County, and so forth that'll say, you know, why, yes, I remember that instrument. That's the only music we had when I was a boy, you know. And so I still meet people that remember them, usually old people. Most of the people who play them now, it's a product of a folk music revival. But early in this century and all through the last century, they were played a lot. Cecil Sharp mentions the dulcimer in his introduction to his ballad collection, and he heard of it when he was over here taking down ballads, and he said he heard that over in eastern Kentucky that they played an instrument called the dulcimer, but he never did get over to hear it. So.
Next, a discussion on, well, the difference between music today and yesterday. Bluegrass Views on Bluegrass, a music special this afternoon on the Sunday Show. Here's Barb Edwards, Ashland, Kentucky preserver of historic bluegrass music folklore, and her thoughts on music today versus yesterday.
Well, you have your music in little cans now. You can put on the record player or turn on the radio, and the music's done for you. But back then, I mean, it really was a do-it-yourself thing. If you had any music, you did it. And that's one reason that you find music as coming down into tradition in certain families. Now, I could say go out here in Lewis County or Elliott County, and I would find families where the man plays the fiddle or the woman sings ballads. They learned it from their mother or father and on back. Then you'll find a family that there never was any music in their family. And so, you know, it really is a handed-down thing, and you either made your own or did without.
Next, we talk about bluegrass music being the daily newspaper. Now, Bluegrass Views on Bluegrass, featuring an interview this afternoon with Barbara Edwards, a local Ashland musician. And we were talking about bluegrass music actually being the daily newspaper.
Well, I don't know if it was always before we had newspapers out on the streets, but in many rural communities, you know, everybody didn't receive a morning paper. And if an event happened, like a murder, somebody was very apt to write a ballad on it. The old-timers never use the word ballad for what they sing. They're not going to say, I'm going to sing you a ballad, unless they've got the words and they've copied them out by hand. Then you've got the ballad of it, is what they say. And somebody might compose this ballad.
Well, what do they call it?
They call it ballad.
Oh.
Okay. Once it's written down, they'll just call it an old song, or of the real old ballads, they'll just call them old love songs or something. But it's only educated people that'll refer to all of it as ballads. Yeah, but we had a tradition too. Court days was very important in many of the county, towns. And this is when you had, the murderer comes in for his trial, Well, somebody like in this area, Blind Bill Day, who was known as Gilson Setters, is kind of a stage name that Gene Thomas gave him, but he was a blind fiddler and very good. And from what I've heard, he made his appearance at every court days in 20 counties, and he was at Moorhead, way down the southeast at Catlettsburg. My dad remembers seeing him. A lot of people do, and he composed many ballads. The famous one of the Round County Troubles, which was a murder on an election day in Moorhead. Trouble at Moorhead, some of them call it. He composed that, and he might sell them for a dime a piece. And he was an old blind man. He had to get all the money he could he would hawk ballads or play his fiddle. Maybe some of the old fiddlers played with the tin cup, and some of them, like this blind Ed Haley in Ashland. This was a little before my time, but he played on a street corner. His wife backed him with kind of a mandolin type instrument and with his tin cup, and I've heard tapes now. The man was a musical genius by any standards. I've never heard a living fiddler right now that could be his equal.
Wow.
And people just walked right by, or maybe dropped a dime in his cup,
So these were like the daily newsletter, except it was sung.
Yes.
To get the information across?
Very often, yes, and every detail of what happened was usually written into the ballad, and sometimes that makes them kind of long and maybe a little boring because it tells you the date and who killed who. And if you get into a ballad that's written where there was a feud and you have all these complicated alliances, and by the time they've written a verse on each one, it's really something.
I wonder, how long did it take them from the time that this thing happened, wherever it was in the court or what, till they had it singing it on the street? Was it quick?
Very quick, yes. Sometimes, maybe within a week, people would start hearing a ballad.
We're talking with Barb Edwards about the singing newsletter, the original bluegrass music. And here's an example of how that might be presented on your doorstep.
It was upon one rainy night, the 2nd day of May. Stelly Kinney was murdered, for whom she was on her way. From her Uncle Robert Frazier's, where she had been to stay, and spent 10 months with him before her fatal day. She's taken to the city hall, and on a cot she lay.
Bluegrass Views on Bluegrass. Original singing letter there for a newspaper. Perhaps Western Union didn't really have anything with a singing telegram. One never knows. Next up, we'll be talking to Barb about what she likes to do. That's collect old folklore music that almost is on the endangered species list. It's 128, folks.